Here we go, starting off with Bitcoin right here. I want to follow up on the last few days, this thread of analysis that we've been essentially going off of which we have basically hit our downside targets off of the break of $44,500 right here. Looking at some sort of a move down to about 38 to 39,000 bucks. We've gotten that at a low of yesterday, tested twice at about 39,200 or so. And for right now, I do think that we're very likely looking at a bounce in the interim. The reason why is, as we kind of highlighted yesterday, the 4-hour BBWP is finally starting to go into a contraction phase. This is kind of what I was waiting for right here, specifically below the moving average, as you can see on this particular chart. And now I do look at this as likely a corrective move incoming. Now, again, do not confuse corrective move with a reversal. I think that Bitcoin is very far from a reversal right here, but it can trade a bit more sideways and very likely a nice try to the upside somewhere around our more shallow fibs in this case. Somewhere around the 382 is completely fair game. That would be about $41,500 to $42,000. Of course, there is going to be invalidation conditions with this, but for right now, we are starting to build up 4-hour bullish divergence on the 4-hour RSI. I'd like to see maybe one more drive here. So it could be that we do get maybe one more slight move to the downside, somewhere in the mid 38th perhaps. But ultimately, I would be looking for a bounce from there before further potential continuation. And like I said, bounce targets can very easily come up into the mid 41s to perhaps even 42,000 bucks. Also, kind of lining that up with our momentum oscillators from a stochastic perspective. We do see over here on the daily, really not going to take too much to flip this one back onto the upside. Again, this would very likely be a corrective move. So corrective within the context of our current trend is, well, bounce into likely another lower high. But in this case, any sort of a closure on the daily, that is on the daily above 39,700, and we will flip that back onto the upside. You can also see that this has come down to the same levels that we have been coming down to in the past few months here, January and again in February for these, for these nice bounces. Let's actually highlight this out. I'm going to highlight this one right here and this one right here, and we can just go back to this really quick. This one over here, a corrective bounce. Obviously, this was not like, a major reversal. This one over here, again, another kind of corrective bounce, not a major reversal, but, a pretty damn good move right there. So ultimately, I am looking for, generally a bounce before further continuation to the downside, if that's going to happen. If we go over here to the 12-hour, I imagine that this one is also kind of flipping around the same region, and yes, indeed it is. 39,600 going to be the magical number. The 6-hour also going to be showing upside from about the same region at about 39.5. It's kind of building on top of each other right now, and you can start to see that the pivots are basically in the mid 39s. 4-hour is actually going to be showing about 40,000 bucks. 3-hour is going to be showing I imagine something around there as well, 39.6, and hourly is going to be showing probably in the shallow 40s. Actually, no, it's up above 39.8. So what does that likely align with? Maybe a bit of sideways today to open up the day, and then around the time that U.S. market opens up, or around sometime early in the trading day for U.S. market open, or around U.S. market open is what I'm trying to say. Bitcoin probably does bounce here, but again, bounce not the same thing as, of course, a reversal. Reversal talk on the higher term timeframes is completely banned, as Mr. Night King said earlier in the Discord yesterday. Bless you, sir. Also, now you're just getting rude with it. Is banned until Bitcoin's back above minimum 42. Even that's not going to be good enough for me. $44,000, kind of my major daily closing basis for a potential, or in my opinion, a confirmed bear trap with big targets up, like humongous targets up towards the deep 50s. Actually, until that happens, that's all hopium and unlikely to happen, I suppose you could say. Anyways, and also the 4-hour Joule actually given a nice little low signal right there for the short term. So all of that kind of plays with each other. And then yes, we do have our funny rates over here, getting our first negative print on the daily read since basically the first day of the month, which was a very, very small read. And to put this into perspective, we haven't really seen these sort of low negative reads since like late January, when Bitcoin was put in that first spike to the downside way back on over here. If we could just go back to it for a second, I'm talking about this area right here, actually. Late January. So, likely going to see a bit of sideways and probably a bounce, probably over the next 36 to 48 hours, if I had to guess. Anyways, with that in mind, and also I did mince one thing as well over here on the Gaussian channel. We did hit the bottom side of it on the 5-day. Now, I'm going to really differ than a lot of other people on the Gaussian channel. in general, but in this case, probably going to bounce here first and foremost, and then if we're going to see continuation, probably happens in like the next after this next closure in the next 5 to 10 days. If we're going to be looking at something like that. Anyways, now let's go over here to the 5-day. The 5-day on CME, I think, is really is quite telling. It just actually closed the 5-day yesterday night at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, and if we do throw on our major moving averages and our drawing tools, you'll notice that closed on the lows, usually not a good sign. Again, can very easily bounce on this next 5-day period here, maybe even up to 10 days. But ultimately, as long as Bitcoin's below, in this case, in this scenario right here, the 42.5 region on a 5-day closing basis, it's very, 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 very likely continuation over the next period or two from there. So again, short term, more likely to trade a bit more sideways and bounce. Bounce can come up very easily, even to $42,000, but that does not do anything for the higher term timeframes. As far as this goes, we are seeing a couple of rather concerning things. We are seeing incredibly low BBWP over here on the 5-day for CME, and this one is starting to expand. I don't think it's necessarily there just yet, but we have seen these low reads a few times in the history, all of them resulting in humongous moves. And so I think that we're kind of on the cusp of that. And again, if that moves comes to the upside and we do see a validation above $44,000 on a daily closing basis, I would be looking for a move towards $56,000, maybe even $65,000 in the next like month and a half or so. But to the downside, I do think is a little more likely for right now. Obviously, we already did confirm weekly hidden bearish divergence, which we identified coming into the closure of last week on both CME and spot price action. And so I do put the weight on this for direction. Now, we've already hit sort of the easy target for this one. If we're going to see continuation from this, it's probably not going to happen until around like end of month, right? So with all of that in mind, let's see how deep into the video are we here. About 6:30. Yeah, we should now go a little bit more deeper into it. Okay, so the other reasons why I do suspect that there's more than likely more continuation to the downside, or perhaps it's better to say that I wouldn't be looking for a major, in this case, potentially even macro low until this condition at minimum is met. And it once again comes back to the global open interest over here, of which, if we do see, or whenever we do see the global open interest get above 13.5 billion plus a local high confirmed for the past few years, anytime that we've seen that sort of a setup, it's led to at minimum a 20% pullback or correction, if you want to call it that, and and in some cases even 50%. Obviously, we've already played out about 20% from high to low in this case. But the reason why I'm calling this out right here is because after that event has happened, we typically see a reset, or we've always seen a reset on open interest. And that reset level, where essentially things can kind of, once again, I guess, in this case, put in a major low, comes in at minimum just above 10 billion, actually. 10 billion, as you can see right here from our last few lows in January and February, and again in March, just below 10 billion in this case. Now, of course, we do naturally expect that to get that, that level to rise up over time. The reason being because, this market is maturing, obviously, and as a maturing market goes, more people getting involved, just naturally there's going to be more, leverage on the board, right? We expect that. And we've seen that, even going from last summer in May, these lows over here at about 5.5 billion compared to our lows, of course, earlier this year in 2022. At about 10 billion. I mean, that's increased by a significant factor, obviously. Now, again, I would be looking for a correction down there on open interest as that sort of unravels, likely alongside price action as well. It doesn't necessarily imply that it must go down, because we've kind of already hit the easier targets for that. Maybe a little bit more down, somewhere around about like low 38, but ultimately, it's not until we really start to break below about 30, what was it, 38 or 37, I think, where I look for that next major continuation drive. Yeah, about 38, actually. 38 would be rather damning for looking for continuation drives back down to $34,000 to $35,000 would be sort of my next setup in that case. Until then, we should also identify that the leverage ratio between, of course, leverage and, well, spot positions has never been higher. So this market continues to do what this market does best, which is be over leveraged as fuck. And fair enough, man. So with all of that in mind, I do want to once again bring back this chart over here. I think that this chart is really, really important because of what it is not done just yet, which is the 5-day chart. Most importantly, with respect respect to BBWP, measuring volatility. We still have yet to see the expansion off of this very, very low level right here. All of the expansions from around this level have led towards about 45% moves to the upside or the downside. And in this case, while Bitcoin does spend a lot of time down here, it would actually be very reasonable and logical to say that the expansion from this current region is probably going to be on the upper end of that, probably north of 50% to be quite fair. And to put this in perspective, you know, again, if we haven't seen the expansion from this region just yet, then we cannot, or at least I cannot, you can do whatever you want, obviously, I cannot extrapolate the targets that would be relevant from that region just yet. Now, if we were to take it exactly from this region, assuming that we're going to get the next spike to the upside on the BBWP, meaning that it starts to expand, then, you know, 56,000 bucks to the upside would be kind of relevant in this case, and 24 to 25,000 bucks to the downside would be relevant. Obviously, one of the reasons why I am more so leaning into more long-term tries to the downside would be the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator. The reason being because anytime that we have seen that expansion, that expansive phase of BBWP volatility alongside a direction chosen on the 5-day stochastic momentum, that has gotten the right move essentially. Now we can obviously backtest this right here. I've done this a million times, so I don't want to bore you with this, but basically the average move is about 45% over the course of just above 40 days. In this case right now, we're going to see 5-day stochastic momentum turn to the downside with any sort of a closure on the next 5-day below $43,000. $43,000 is decently above even the short-term like hopium corrective targets at around like $41,500 to $42,000, which I'm not even too married to that idea getting hit, to be quite frank with you. So as long as Bitcoin is below there, risk does remain to the downside, over time. It's not going to happen all in one day, let alone like one fucking closure right here. In fact, I think at best, I think at worst, we're probably trading sideways and maybe test a little bit more to the downside overall. But yes, you know, if Bitcoin does break below 38,000 bucks, I would be looking for the next sort of, nice little short-term melt towards about 34 to 35 and likely another try for a bit of a bounce right there on the higher term timeframes. So yes, I think that's a good place to kind of leave off on this analysis. As always, if you find this content valuable, or if you just want to, support the channel in a nice costless way, consider liking the video, as that is the easiest way to do that. So there we go. And hopefully that was helpful.